Good morning. It's a Wednesday, and that means it's time for Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter to talk all kinds of stuff related to foreign policy. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter here. And don't forget, Scott Ritter's website is scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com. Go there for all things Scott Ritter, all the good works that Scott's doing, where he's going, what his plans are, and et cetera, scottritterextra.com. Also, when you go to scottritterextra.com, there's a method there that you can support Scott Ritter. Everybody's got to eat. He's doing good work and he's got to feed his family and keep the lights on. So scottritterextra.com, make sure you donate. Also, if you want to donate to this channel, buy me a coffee is great. You can see all the stuff scrolling across the top, bottom, Patreon, buy me a coffee, etc., PayPal, whatever the case may be. Okay, let's get to it. You know, Scott, let's start here. We're talking beforehand about things to talk about, but here's something I want to start with because you've done a lot of work specifically with NATO. Number one, Jens Stoltenberg came out recently, I believe it was Stoltenberg, and spilled the beans and said, and literally said, Russia went to war because of NATO expansion on their border, but doggone it, we got Finland and Sweden. He's going to get even more NATO expansion. He makes it clear. All we had to do was sign a deal that we wouldn't expand his border and talk about him, and we wouldn't have had this war, but that's not what we do. Number one, put two things together. Here's the second thing. Yesterday was if we want to use this word, anniversary of the Biden people blowing the hell out of Nord Stream. I'm not going to throw anything else out there. I'm going to just throw this to you, Scott. How long can NATO survive this? How long can NATO stay together with this mother of all debacles that's going down on so many fronts? Scott Ritter, your thoughts?
Well, like anything, organizations that have the length of time in service that NATO has are difficult to kill. They've insinuated themselves so much. NATO has insinuated itself so much into the psyche of Europe and America that in many ways people believe that it's an existential relationship, meaning that Europe can't live without NATO. The United States can't live without NATO. NATO is an absolute essential part of our modern geopolitical life. So even when you have things happening that clearly expose the reality that NATO has long been past its shelf life, it lost all the reason for being when the Cold War ended, when the Soviet Union went away. There was literally no justification for NATO. NATO's been struggling to define a mission ever since, transforming itself from a purely defensive alliance into this catastrophe today that seeks regime change around the world, carries out offensive, illegal operations on European soil. I just reflect everybody to 1999, Serbia, Kosovo. Nothing legal about that, guys. Pure naked aggression. And then we see NATO literally leading Europe to not just to the edge of the cliff, but they've pushed Europe off the cliff. I mean, Europe is in free fall right now. Germany. It's not just the embarrassment of Nord Stream and the fact that the German government was complicit in this. Olaf Scholz. I mean, I'm not a specialist on German law, but I would hope that there's something on the books that reflects that it's not a good thing for a German chancellor to collude with America to carry out an attack on German infrastructure that's critical to the survival of the German state. The German state is failing today across the board. It's deindustrializing at a rate that's unimaginable. This is the economic engine of the European Union. There wouldn't be a European Union if it weren't for the German economy. The Germans had to, make a lot of sacrifices in the name of, European unity. The Deutschmark was a very powerful currency, and they had to give up the Deutschmark for the euro, and the euro is underwritten by the strength of the German economy. And yet today, the German economy is in free fall. And a large reason for this, in fact, I think almost exclusively, is the impact that the destruction, not just of the Nord Stream pipeline. Let's be frank, no gas was flowing at the time of its destruction. But according to Seymour Hersh, and this was something that I talked about at the time too, the cause and effect relationship dealing with the timing was that the Germans' population was getting ready to put pressure on Schultz and the parliament to open up the Nord Stream pipeline, to say, hey guys, this self-strangulation of energy isn't smart. We, rather than freeze to death this winter and pay 5 times the going rate for American natural gas, why don't we just hit the on switch to this stuff right here? It's cheap, it's coming in, it's ready to flow, and we'll do quite well. Our industries won't have to shut down. This is back when, German, metal smelters, aluminum smelters, steel smelters, foundries were saying, hey, we can't operate because the thing that makes our stuff get hot so that we can make metal you want is natural gas. And we sort of priced everything out based upon the availability of this really cheap stuff coming from Russia that we had long-term contracts for. So, we're in business, we do long-term planning, and all of our, modernization efforts, the pay raises we gave people, all this good life we have here in Germany, the taxes we're paying you, come from a business model that is predicated on the continued availability of this cheap Russian gas. So please don't shut it off, because if you do, we go out of business. And guess what? They've gone out of business. They're shutting down. They're moving off. It's a tragedy. So how much longer? I mean, Germany also is an important anchor in NATO. It was Germany before Poland that talked about spending 100 billion euros on the modernization of the German army. Remember that? They were going to take the lead. That was back when everybody thought the Leopard was a good tank, that the Marder was a good infantry fighting vehicle, and the Germans actually knew what the hell they're doing. Now it's clear the Germans are just incompetent across the board. They don't produce good equipment. Their soldiers aren't any good. Their tactics aren't good. Their doctrine's not good. They're corrupt. The Germans sort of sent a message to NATO saying, hey, yeah, on that 100 billion, that's cool. And on that 2% GDP thing, we're going to cool that too as well. We don't have any money left. We got nothing. We're bankrupt. We're done. Finished. Goodbye. That's Germany. France is heading in that direction. Look at France. I mean, they just got slapped around like a little, misbehaving child in Africa by Niger, by Mali, by Burkina Faso. This was France-Afrique. This was their post-colonial empire, that the little French secret nobody wanted to talk about, that France still had African slaves. They didn't call them slaves, but they were African slaves. They were working for pennies to the dollar, selling France uranium at 80 cents to the kilo when the going rate is $200. France is taking this uranium and powering up its country, electrifying France. Meanwhile, in Niger, there's no electricity. Kids are running around barefoot because it's a poverty-stricken nation. And they finally, the Africans finally went, yeah, we're done. We're finished. Goodbye. Goodbye to you. And France was like, we won't do that. We're France. This is France-Afrique. We are a powerful nation. And then they realized that they're not a powerful nation. They have 1,500 hostages in Niger, and they're talking big. We're gonna launch a military operation with ECOWAS, the Economic Council of West African States. It's supposed to be an economic council, but they're talking about a military intervention. But ECOWAS is going, hey, we really don't have much of a military. It's going to be Nigeria and a couple others, but mainly Nigeria. But they don't have a military, and they're sort of tied down fighting Boko Haram. And France, we need your help if we're going to do this. And France is like, we will help you. Can we help them? No, we can't help you. So we're leaving Niger, and now they're fleeing. And that's the third. I mean, since 2022, Mali kicked them out. Earlier this year, 2023, Burkina Faso kicked them out. Now, by the end of the year, France is fleeing Niger. Why? Because France is a fundamentally broken country with no viable military power at all, like the rest of NATO. I just named two of the most powerful nations in NATO, Germany and France. They ain't got nothing, ladies and gentlemen, nothing, zero zilch. France can't even go to Africa and save its former colony. So what are they going to do against the Russians? Not a damn thing. The Italians, even bigger joke. There's not a serious military on the continent. I mean, even off the continent, offshore is that vaunted British military. You know, the guys that if you sold the British Army, if you handed out free tickets to a soccer match and said, hey, why don't you come to that big stadium there in London? The British Army, all of it could show up and you'd still have 30,000 unfilled seats because they're that small and they're getting smaller. Europe is a joke, a literal joke. Now, Jan Stoltenberg's going, we're going to build it up, man. 300,000. We're going to build a rapid deployment force of 300,000. It is a joke. It will never happen. Never happen. But Stoltenberg, you know, is now being honest. NATO expansion caused this war. But what he says is, don't blame us. Because it's not as though NATO went over there and twisted arms. All those Eastern European nations wanted to be members of NATO, and we have an open door policy. But there is no such thing. I mean, open door policy isn't linked to the charter. I've read the charter. The charter doesn't say it. What the charter says is that people who want to become NATO, there's a process, and the NATO collective have to look at it and decide, do these people meet the standards politically, economically, militarily to join NATO? But the most important thing is this in the collective national security interest of NATO? And that's what Jan Stoltenberg doesn't want to talk about, because if he said, well, that's a requirement of the charter, I think it's Article 10, there's no way in hell you could say expanding NATO, knowing that it's going to lead to a confrontation with Russia, is in the collective national security interest of NATO. It's maybe in the interest of the United States, who's using NATO as a means of empowering a proxy called Ukraine that we're all sacrificing on the, on the pyre. Throw more wood on the pyre. See if we get the Ukrainian witch to burn even more. But the moral vacuum that exists in Europe, in NATO, is real, and eventually what's going to happen is it's going to just fall in on itself and go away. What's the timetable for that? Sooner rather than later. I mean, the reality is, no matter how much NATO is going to kick and scream, at some point in time, you can't afford to continue something that it's like a company that lies to itself, cheats on the books, lies, extorts, commits fraud, etc. You can maintain that company for a number of years and it looks really good. But the moment somebody uncovers that first evidence of corruption, they start coming in, they realize that the whole thing's done. That company folds like a house of cards. NATO is a literal house of cards. And at some point in time, it's going to fold. And I think the folding is going to come from a nation like Germany or France, where they just say, we can't do it anymore. Germany's getting there rapidly. Wait till this winter. The German government just announced that they can't pay the subsidies, gas subsidies, the energy subsidies to the German people. We don't have any money. They said, we got nothing. So, the fact that America's selling us gas at 5 times the market price and your gas bills are going on, all of Germany is going to go bankrupt this winter. Every German household is either going to freeze to death. Let's pray for their sake that it's a very mild winter. But if it's a cold winter, if there's a lengthy cold snap and Germany eats through its gas reserves and there's nothing left to tap into, the German people are going to suffer. And when they start to suffer, things are going to happen. If Germany collapses, as it very well might, that's the end of NATO right there. That's the first part. Because the house of cards looks pretty impressive when you build it up. Take that photograph, big house of cards. And if you paint the cards enough, you can make people believe it's actually stone or wood. And it's got substance, but it's still a house of cards. And all it takes is one person to come in and go on the corner. That first card goes, the whole thing's down. That's the future of NATO.
I think you are quite correct. One of the things that I do want to hit on, that we got to hit on, I do want to talk about what's going on over here, and that is, we're the issue of these so-called red line pinpricks, right? So, as God knows, we don't even want to discuss the numbers, the depressing numbers on the battlefield. I mean, 17,000 dead in September, 71,000 in like 6 weeks of so-called offense. This is not an offensive. This is just a kamikaze attack. But what they have resorted to, it appears to me, is they'll fire a couple of missiles at a building in Sevastopol and say, we killed the Russian Black Fleet commander. 2 days later, he's wandering around at a meeting, drinking a cup of coffee. So he doesn't stay dead long, I'll tell you that much. But it seems to me that these things are provocations. You know what I mean? They're not going to have a material effect on the conflict. It seems to me a sign of desperation. We can't do anything on the battlefield, so we're going to throw some missiles we got over here and try to blow them up. The U.S. says, we'll give you ATACMS. No, we won't. Yeah, we will. No, we won't. Oh, we've got some ATACMS that have some bomblets on them. We'll give you well, maybe we won't. It seems like this pinprick attack thing every other day. Some quadcopter with a freaking mortar or something on it slams into the side of a building in some town. What do you think about the so-called pinprick attacks that a lot of people call them? The desperation of that and Russia's response, which I'll just say this. I think they're wise. Why would you respond? You're winning a war. These things aren't really hurting you. They're just an aggravate. They're mosquito bites when it comes to the Russian military. Embarrassing. They leave a red spot, they itch for a little while, and they go away. Your thoughts on the pinprick, drone, missile, storm shadow, etc. attack, Scott Ritter?
Let's keep in mind that Russia's got its eye firmly on the ball. Russia's not looking for a negotiated settlement. They're not looking to make any compromises. Russia's not acting out of desperation. They're engaged in a very serious military campaign that's designed to destroy the Ukrainian military and collapse the Ukrainian government. End of story. There's no calendar attached to it. I mean, I attach a calendar because people ask me, it's the million-dollar question, Scott, when's it all going to end? I mean, the real answer is, I don't know. We all don't know because there's so many factors involved. But if you do analysis of the battlefield, I've said, and I think it's fairly accurate, the Ukrainian army will suffer a strategic defeat by the end of summer, early fall of this year. Well, we're past the end of summer. We're heading towards early fall. And what's happening on the battlefield? The strategic defeat of the Ukrainian army. The strategic defeat of the Ukrainian army will, I believe, lead to the collapse of the Ukrainian government politically. But what's happening now is the political collapse may actually take place before the army's defeated. We see what's happening with Zelensky. The Poles are turning their back on him. He's had a bad week, a horrible week. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But the week ended with his wife giving this horrible interview from the perspective of the Zelensky family and Zelensky 260 Minutes. The last question itself was, about the future, about the president's elections. And, we've all seen American wives, you're asked, Mrs. Biden, how do you feel your husband's prospects are for 2024? Oh, Joe's doing such a good job. The American people love Joe. I mean, he goes to NASCAR races and they're saying, let's go, Joe. Let's go. It's awesome. They just love him so much. Joe's really looking forward to this campaign. That's what they say, even though deep inside they might be, oh, God, it's falling apart. She just straight up went, I don't know if we're going to win this election. I don't know if he wants to be president anymore. I don't know if the Ukrainian people want him to be president. Why would the wife of the president, who's looking at an election, be talking like that? Because they're beat. They're crushed. Their spirit is sucked out of them. This is the reality. So there could be this collapse taking place. But that's why, so the Russians are basically looking at it saying, hey, guys, everything's going our way. We're killing them on the battlefield. The Zelensky government's collapsed. NATO's in free fall. The United States is embarrassed. Canada's embarrassed. Everybody's embarrassed. We're looking pretty good. So let's not change anything. We're not going to change anything. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are going, we got to change everything. We got to get everything to change, especially the calculus of the balance of forces on the battlefield. We got to get NATO and the United States to continue to send us money and equipment. So to do that, if we can't give them the big victory, we got to show them that the Russians are the big bad wolf, that if you don't help us, even though we're getting our butts handed to us right now, that Russia's coming for you. So please, more. And to do that, you got to provoke the Russians into behaving like a big bad wolf. And so you do really stupid things, like you attack the Black Sea headquarters, even though it's an old historic building. Nobody's inside it. Everybody's run to the bunker. Purely a provocative strike. Wasn't done for any legitimate military reasons. Scott, isn't it a Black Sea naval headquarters? That's a legitimate military reason. If you want to go strike empty museum quality buildings and call it a legitimate military reason, go ahead. But what they're trying to do is get the Russians to respond in a provocative manner. And Dmitry Medvedev and the Russian parliament have said, by hitting the Black Sea Fleet, you've pretty much taken the gloves off. We can strike any one of your decision-making centers anytime we want. That means the Ministry of Defense, that means Parliament, that means the Office of the Presidency, all that. Why hasn't Russia done it? Because the last thing Russia wants to do, Putin is a master of escalation management. The last thing the Russians want to do is provide NATO, the West, any more justification for continuing to support the Ukrainians, up to and including the possible provision of NATO ground forces on the ground. I mean, there's some disturbing things. I don't know if it's true. There are a lot of rumors running around Telegram about a Leopard tank with a German crew. According to the Russian channels, this was a German army crew. They have the name of the unit these guys were from. I'd like to think, though, because you remember during the Battle of Mariupol, when the Mi-8 HIPs were flying in and evacuating people out of after being surrounded by the Russians. The Russians shot down a couple of these HIPs, and on board they found bodies, and the bodies had French commando berets. They had, and they showed it to people. They said, "Hey, look, Frenchmen on this airplane." So I would imagine that if you knocked out a Leopard tank and there were 3 Germans in there, one of them's alive in uniform, speaking German, he's got documents on it, that this would have come out here. So I treat this with a little bit of grain of salt. I don't know where to go with this one, but there's that. But more and more people are talking about whispers inside NATO about the need in an emergency to deploy boots on the ground, etc. Who knows? But what I do know is that if Russia behaves as if it does pose an existential threat to NATO, that NATO may be inclined to do something, and something the Russians don't want them to do. So the best thing for Russia to do is not overreact to any of these pinprick things. And politically, it's a bad look. I mean, it really is a bad look. But from an operational standpoint, it's nothing. It literally has zero impact on the battlefield. So the Russians, they're mature. Putin's mature. You don't see any panic in Putin. Putin's not going on the TV every day trying to justify what's going like Jan Stoltenberg does. He's not like General Milley in his final week giving press conference after press conference after press conference about what's really going on the front line. The Ukrainian military has advanced through several layers of the Russian defense. Liar. But it doesn't matter. The Russians are just like, yeah, we're still killing Ukrainians in large numbers, and we're still doing this, we're still doing that. Sorry if I'm yawning, but it's sort of like a repeat from yesterday. We're winning. That's where we're at right now.
Let's come back here for a little bit. Bad signs for Zelensky and crew. He comes to NATO. He comes to the UN. He goes to speak, and he's talking to an empty room. They got to literally fill the chairs with like AI film video programs, and he ends up in the audience watching himself. Clearly, the world is not the world leaders are not shy about rejecting this guy. He tries to come to the House. McCarthy et al. Say, "Nah, we can't put you in front of this house." And I think they were really, to be quite honest, I think they were afraid of the reaction. I think they were afraid there could be some booze. There could be something happening there that would humiliate. How humiliating would it be for the Biden administration if this guy gets booed or somebody does something in Congress that's bad? So he does that. However, he goes to Canada. They bring some friggin' Nazi World War II scumbag. He stands up, and you talk about as Alexander McCurris put it, a ghastly debacle. The world stands, with their eyes and their mouths open as these guys give a thundering applause for a Nazi. He's pumping his fist in the air. Poland, they're done. Not that I think Poland's looking for any excuse they can to back away, because people, I think. People have been a while expecting Poland to end up on the battlefield. And as you said, they wouldn't be on the battlefield long. If they showed up on that battlefield and Russia didn't want them there, their troops would be vaporized really, really quick. So at any rate, What happened with, and Poland's got an election coming up next month. What happened with Canada, the UN, and how Poland is reacting? The Czech Republic, people are there in the streets. When you start seeing things falling apart in Poland, the UN, Canada, Scott Ritter.
I mean, we'll start with Poland. I mean, there's been bad blood between the Poles and the Ukrainians for some time now, but everybody's been sweeping it under the rug, trying to promote the notion of some sort of greater Polish, Lithuanian, Ukrainian, union. And there's been talk about putting laws on the books that create some sort of, open border, customs waivers, things of that nature. But then reality hits, because at the same time this is happening, Poland is just stuffed to the gills with Ukrainian refugees who aren't behaving very well. You see, because a lot of the Ukrainians that fled are people that have really, really nice cars and trunks full of money that they stole, and they come in and they stay in hotels and they behave just abysmally. That there are legitimate Ukrainian refugees, people who lost their everything and are grateful for the assistance that's provided, but their existence is overshadowed by these really, really bad behaving Ukrainians, who, especially the men of military age who get drunk and beat up Poles on the street, who dare question their role there. Why aren't you dying on the battlefield, you Ukrainian POS? So the Poles, and then the other thing too is, remember there's a history here. Hundreds of thousands of Poles were forcefully expelled from Western Ukraine at the end of World War II, to create an ethnically pure Ukrainian state. The Banderists, Ukrainian nationalists, slaughtered 110,000 Poles in the Volyn region of Western Ukraine, again, in an effort to create a ethnically pure Ukrainian state. Ukraine's not asking forgiveness for this and not apologizing for this. And the Poles are starting to get a little frustrated. Hey, we're helping you guys out, yet you're supporting the Nazis, you're supporting the Banderists who slaughtered us. What gives? There's a lot of questions. So the Polish government's talking union potential and all this stuff, but the Polish people are scratching their heads saying no. And at some point in time, even in a democracy that's as fundamentally flawed as the Polish democracy, the will of the people does, bear out. And Polish politicians are like, we can't be giving the Ukrainians this blank check, especially when the Ukrainians are so arrogant about it. The Poles were at the head of the table saying, hey, we've done everything for you, and you're just so unappreciative. You ask for more, you've never said thank you. You act as if it's our duty to give you this stuff. It's not. We could dump you in a heartbeat, and we may just do that because we're getting fed up with your arrogance, the economic burden that we have on this. We're giving you all of our military equipment at a time when we feel we need to build up our military to deal with an expansive Russian threat. So we're not going to do that anymore. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to let you dump your grain on our market anymore. We have Polish farmers. They grow crops. We need those crops to go to market so our farmers can make money, so our taxes can be paid, our economy can function. So sad, too bad to be you with your failed economy. Don't blame us. Blame yourselves. We're not going to let you dump grain. So there's all this animosity. And that's how Zelensky left Europe, with Poland basically saying, we're done. No more military equipment flowing across the border to you. We're finished. So he shows up at the UN, and as you said, no excitement. I mean, he used to be the rock star. He used to be the guy that got all the great speeches. Remember, he could speak to the British Parliament with Churchillian impact. He could speak to the United States House of Representatives, combined, the joint session of Congress. A speech that Nancy Pelosi said was the greatest speech in the history of the United States Congress. Really? I mean, there's
the Gettysburg Address wasn't much. We wouldn't want to pay attention to that.
I don't want to talk about any of the great orators that have been there, but Zelensky did that. But the fact is, last year Zelensky was like that really popular, new television series with the great writing. You know the one I'm talking about. It always comes up and he goes, it's so innovative. They're doing so many neat things. The writing is so nice and wonderful. But then by the end of season 1, they don't have any more fresh ideas. Season 2 comes in and they're like, their writing sucks. What have they done here? I can't believe that. This is crap. We're in Zelensky season 2, and the writing's no longer good. And so the audience is tuning out. And we saw that when he got before the General Assembly of the United Nations. Empty hall. No one cares anymore. Nobody's buying into the mystique anymore. Everybody looks at this man wearing the olive drab uniform, and they know that he's just a fat, failed comedian pretending to be something he isn't. And it's boring. So then I came down to Washington, and again, the reality in Washington is we can't help you anymore. I mean, I wasn't in the meetings, but Chuck Schumer comes out and is saying, basically Zelensky said, if you don't help me, we lose this war. Well, you're losing the war, and there's nothing America can do to help you. But he wants more money, more money, more money. Went to the Pentagon, told him the same thing: more money, more money, more. Well, he'll probably get the money, knowing how Washington D.C. works, but it ain't going to be pretty. And it sets the stage for future, problems, political problems as we get closer to the election. Right now, I think Zelensky's going to be saved by the fact that his money is linked to a national shutdown, and so he'll probably get at least some of that money. But that's just enough. That just puts him on life support. But then he goes to Canada, and this is where the wheels fall off, because he gets to Canada, and the Canadians expose themselves as the biggest Nazi-loving nation in North America. I mean, they have Chrystia Freeland. He's, the deputy prime minister. She's a straight-up Nazi, the child of a Nazi, grandchild of a Nazi, a Nazi apologist, trained as a Nazi as a child. She went to the Bandera's death camps and learned how to appreciate Bandera and the revised Ukrainian history. She learned how to lie about their past. She knows everything about the 14th Galatian Division of the Waffen SS. This was a unit that, again, Waffen SS, okay, sort of like straight up Nazis, not part-time Nazis, not wannabe Nazis, straight up Nazis. They wear the runes, and they did horrible things. I know. I always love when people from, well, historians are struggling to find a direct connection between the Galatian Division and the crimes that took place in their area of operations. Many historians believe that the Galatian Division didn't do this, that there were SS military police units attached to them that carried out the bulk of the crimes. But we don't know, because ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you something right now. The Galatian Division was staffed with Western Ukrainian thugs who enjoy murdering Jews, who enjoy murdering Poles, who enjoy murdering Russians, and they did so in massive numbers, and the data is there. You know who has all the books on this? The Russians. And the Russians have been publishing this over and over again. You know why you can't find it here in the West? Because nations like Canada absorbed all the Nazis, and they immediately got around to rewriting history. That's what Chrystia Freeland did. She's a journalist who rewrote the history of the reality of Ukraine. And Canada led the way in this. They are pulling books that have the real history and replacing them with the fake history, so that a journalist can say, well, the history is sort of unclear on this. No, it's not. It's not unclear at all. The fingers attached to the hands, attached to the arms, attached to the men who wore the uniform of the 14th Galatian Waffen SS Division pulled the triggers that killed the Jews, held the rifles that had the bayonets that stabbed the children and gouged their eyes out. The 98-year-old veteran up there is a war criminal and should be treated as such. He should never have gone to Canada. He and the 14,000 other survivors of the 14th Galatian Division should have been turned over to the Soviets, where they would have been hung and shot and otherwise killed or slaughtered, as they deserve to be, because they are the scum of the earth. They are Waffen SS who killed innocent civilians by the thousands. But no, he and his brethren came to Canada. They rewrote the history, glorifying all this stuff. And to show you how it got out of hand, he was invited to come to Parliament. Now, I've spoken before the Canadian Parliament. I had to be vetted. And I'm sort of well known. So it's not like they were going, Scott who? They Scott Ritter, but we need your passport, and we got to run a background check on you, make sure that you're not wanted for attempted murder or anything like that. And I got to go in with security, still had to go through the metal detector and all that stuff to sit down before the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Canadian Parliament to answer questions and give testimony. Now we have a joint session, a big session of the Canadian Parliament. Two heads of states are there, Justin Trudeau and Volodymyr Zelensky. And Zelensky is the head of a state of a nation at war. So let me tell you what security is like. It's like airtight. Nobody gets into that perimeter. Nobody gets near them unless they are totally vetted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Intelligence Service. That's just a statement of fact. Nobody just appears there. There's, if you're a civilian, you got to say, I want to come, or you have to be invited. Have to be invited to come in. And then they say, who are you? What's your background? And they run the check. To pretend that the Canadian Parliament was ignorant of this man, that he just showed up and they were at the invitation of the Speaker of the Parliament, is just a straight up lie. They invited this Nazi in because that's the thing to do, because Canada is in the business of reinventing history. There are no Nazis in Ukraine. There's just 98-year-old patriots who fought the Russians during World War II. Who else fought the Russians during World War II? I mean, come on. So, anyways, this became a huge embarrassment, And now you have Trudeau sitting here trying to spin this thing. Well, yes, it's an embarrassment, but don't talk about it because that's just Russian propaganda. Well, I have a hard time believing that Maria Zakharova called up the Canadian Speaker of the Parliament and said, hey, just a little prank. Why don't you invite this old guy? We vouch for him. And you can bring him in there and you guys can praise him and get Zelensky to do the fist pump and get Trudeau to clap and get everybody to stand up. It'd just be a fun thing to do. That would be Russian propaganda if they pulled it off. They go, we got you on that one. Russians had nothing to do with this. This is a self-inflicted wound. So that happens. And what it does is it started a discussion about the things nobody wanted to talk about, which is the fact that Ukraine is a Nazi state led by a Nazi leader who celebrates literal Nazis. This is a bad look for Zelensky. And then it gets bookended. The final thing, you start with the Poles insulted them. His wife gives the interview. And she says, basically, I don't think he should run for office again. I mean, it's a bad week for Zelensky. I think it's the beginning of the end of Volodymyr Zelensky. I think we're seeing him on the downward slope of his presidency.
I think you are correct. It's the end is near. Let me ask you this about the Poles. I think this is very important. It's an important dynamic, what's going on with Poland, because they were the massive cheerleaders. They were the biggest cheerleaders. We got to go after Russia. Let's attack them ourselves. Everybody was like, the Poles are over the top. Okay. The Banderites reality is coming. They got Banderites running all over their country, to be quite frank. And they're still threatening them. They're seeing the reality of the history. They're being forced to see Ukraine in it through a historical context. Next month, elections coming in Poland, and Duda, things ain't looking so great for him. And might I add, a lot of his support comes from rural areas, farmers, those who are getting their butts kicked right now by the grain deal. I don't think Poland says this stuff unless they're allowed to. You know what I mean? I don't think Poland says these over-the-top things they're saying unless they are given permission by. Now, it could just be these are the elections coming up, and the U.S. says do what you got to do to win the elections, and after the elections, you can go back to being super hawks. I don't know, but could Poland be put in a position economically, culturally, etc., where they got to bite the bullet here, and at some point they got to kind of, I put it like this, if there's going to be some kind of a resolution to this thing, that they have to be involved. Anyway, your thoughts on Poland? I think Poland is an important cog in this wheel, but anyway, your thoughts.
Well, the thing about Poland, though, is it's not Germany. And what I mean by that is Olaf Scholz and the Green Party have shown a willingness to sell their nation down the road because they are totally dependent upon the United States. Germany is not a sovereign state. I use a word for them that I won't use on your program because I don't want you to get in trouble. But Poland isn't that. I mean, I'm not sitting here singing Poland's praises, but Poland believes in Poland. Poland stands up for Poland. Poland has been using NATO to benefit Poland. Poland has been hyping the Russian threat to get the Fifth Corps headquarters forward deployed there, to get a division headquarters forward deployed, to get brigades permanently stationed in Poland. These are American brigades to transfer the center of gravity of America's military presence in Europe away from Germany onto Polish soil. And now that America has committed billions of dollars to make that a reality, it's Poland that holds the levers, not America. America can't collapse Poland. We're not going to collapse Poland. We need Poland. And Poland also has taken a look at the reality that Ukraine has lost this war. Poland has poured everything into this conflict, to include tens of thousands of Polish soldiers who have been sheep dipped and are fighting over there as mercenaries or part of private military contractors, etc. But they're active duty Polish soldiers. Thousands have come home dead, buried. Poland has stripped its arsenal bare to send over the Soviet era equipment that the Ukrainians wanted. Were giving the Ukrainians some of their most modern equipment at a time when the Poles said, we got to build up our own military. I think Poland's flying solo on this one. I don't think it's like America's whispering in their ear. I think domestic political imperatives, all politics are local, especially on election day. And, Duda, and America's got to know this. If you want Duda, the man who's been a pretty good yes man for America going forward, if you want him to stay in power, you got to give him some latitude to win this election. You got to say, okay, well, let Poland be Poland for a little while. And if Ukraine gets beat up on it, so be it. I mean, how can the United States tell the Poles, and of course, America's kept their nose out. It's the European Commission that's been doing this. You have to allow Ukraine to dump grain on your market. And Duda, as you said, he's a man whose support comes from the rural areas. He's going, that's political suicide. I can't do that. No matter what argument you give me, we can't, because I will. And now we're learning the awful secret of politicians. They don't care about anything other than getting reelected. They will do what it takes to get reelected. They don't believe in anything. They don't stand for anything except getting reelected. So Duda's in panic mode. And so I think the United States has basically said, do what you need to do to keep you in office. Good luck. We have our forces here. We'll continue to support this, but on Ukraine, you're sort of, we're hands off on that for a while because the United States can't intervene. Did you hear anything from the United States publicly when Ukraine said we're just not going to ship more military equipment? Not a word. It's not because America said that's what we want you to do. It's the last thing we want Poland to do. But America's going, we're going to sort of stay silent on this one because of this election. Now, after the election, you might see the pressure come on. You might see Duda changing because he's been elected. So, like anything, a lot of lip movement during the campaign season. But if their lips are moving, they're lying. Don't believe anything he says. And then he gets elected and he comes back and he starts doing that which the higher powers have ordered him to do. But I think that's what's going on in Poland. I don't think this is America. A lot of people are saying this is evidence that America is getting ready to dump Poland. America's never been supporting Poland. I don't know why people don't understand this. When Mark Miley came back, was it Miley or no? It was Lloyd Austin in May of 2022. When he came back from visiting Kiev, he didn't speak about Ukrainian freedom and liberty and all that. He spoke about hurting Russia, that the main strategic objective was to bring enough pain to Russia so that Russia would never again want to carry out something of this nature. It wasn't about let's rally around the Ukrainian flag, let's support Ukrainian nationalism, these freedom-loving people, all that stuff. It was, we're going to hurt Russia. How are we going to hurt Russia? We're going to use the Ukrainians to hurt Russia. And that's the only value Ukraine brings to this entire scenario is that they are willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of their men in an effort to kill tens of thousands of Russians, allowing the GOP put out a ridiculous ad that says, we're spending 5% of our defense budget and we've destroyed 50% of the army. Both those figures are so wrong, it's not even funny. But because Americans are literally the dumbest people on the planet about the planet they live in, Americans are going, that sounds great. I mean, William Crystal put it out there. He's a real American hero. No, William Crystal gave you Iraq. Don't ever forget that, ladies and gentlemen. This is a lying sack of poop who has lied to you about everything. William Crystal doesn't care about the American people, doesn't care America, doesn't care about the Constitution, he doesn't care about anything except William Crystal. And so when he put this ad out, it's not designed to do the right thing. It's designed to get the right people elected who will help benefit William Crystal. He's a liar. everybody, the ad is a lie. Everything about it is a lie, but people are looking at it. That's where we're at right now.
Um, oh gosh, I was going to say something important. I forgot what it was. I mean, I had a great question, right? And then I got into everything you were saying. I'm like, oh crap, I'm supposed to be the interviewer here, Scott.
Happens to me all the time.
Oh
The
God,
older I get, too.
yeah. Looking at the discussion of, and we've had this discussion for I don't know how long, and we all know how it goes. When are the Russians going to do an offensive, right? We're only weeks away from the muddy, rainy season. Then, of course, the talk will be, well, maybe they'll wait until things freeze and then they'll attack. No, they'll wait until spring and things, but then they'll attack. It just seems to me, what are those Komodo dragons, right? Komodo dragon, it's interesting the way they hunt because their saliva stops your blood from clotting. So they just bite you and they follow you and you bleed. They get a chance again, they bite you. They're patient. They ain't in no rush. They know you're going to bleed out. Time's on their side. And eventually, things ain't going to work out well for you. It seems to me this is kind of like a Komodo dragon thing. You know what I mean? They're striking, they're bombing, they're hitting, and they sit back and let them bleed for a while and watch and go. It's that patient kind of thing. Putin's going to meet with Xi Jinping next month. Now, everybody thinks, oh, he's going to attack ahead of that. He's going to attack after that. From what I've been watching, that could very well be related to North Korea. It could very well be related to all of these economic things they're doing with BRICS. It doesn't have to be a plan for the next attack because they got so many things going on right now. Scott Ritter, you're in charge. Do you launch a big offensive or do you kind of watch them bleed and say, man, it's going to be a bad winter for you guys if it's cold? I got a funny feeling that this thing may collapse on us. You know what I mean? I'm watching it in free fall. And now the Komodo dragon's watching you and you're starting to stumble and get lightheaded and you ain't moving. He ain't got to bite you no more. You're getting ready to drop. Now he's going to get his butter and his salt and pepper, and he's putting a little napkin around here. He's just waiting. You're going to fall. Your thoughts, Scott Ritter? You're in charge of the Russian military.
First of all, Garland,
do you launch an attack or do you wait from the? Go ahead.
Well, I just want to let your audience know that I came up with the Komodo dragon analogy first. Garland stole it from me. So I'm taking it back now. No, that's not true. That's brilliant. I love it. I'm going to use it. I love that analogy. And I apologize for smiling because now we have to come back to reality. It means that people are going to die in large numbers, mainly Ukrainian. Okay, if I'm in charge, put on my Russian hat for a minute. Of course, all the people in the audience are like, you always had a Russian hat on, Ritter. You've been a Putin shill from day one. But, so be it. Russia's objectives are fairly simple and straightforward. They want to secure the territory of Russia from any threat. That means that Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk, the 4 territories that have been brought into the Russian Federation through a referendum, whether you agree with it or not, doesn't matter. The Russian Constitution has certified it as such. These territories are Russia. And Putin has given a speech earlier this year where he said, my objective right now is to restore the economic and social well-being of these territories. And so that's what they do. In order to do that, you have to eliminate the military threat posed by the Ukrainian army. So now the destruction of the Ukrainian army is an imperative. That's taking place as we speak. It's being destroyed. He also said that whatever government's in place can't be this government because it threatens Russia. So there's going to need to be the political collapse of Ukraine. And then he said, when all that happens, whatever comes out of this can't be a member of NATO. Isn't going to be a member of NATO, some sort of neutrality. Now, none of those talking points that we just laid out conform with the 10 points of peace plan put out by Zelensky, which requires Russia to surrender, turn over Putin, return all lands, et cetera, et cetera. So far, so there's not going to be a negotiated settlement. This isn't like the start of the war when Russia was playing to get Ukraine to the negotiating table, and they almost succeeded. They had that finished treaty product that could have been signed into effect on 1 April, except Boris Johnson came in and put the nix on it, condemning 500,000 Ukrainian men to death. Russia's not playing for that. They're not playing for some sort of compromise solution. They're playing for total victory to achieve their objectives. You don't achieve total victory by having a ceasefire. And ceasefires can be formal and informal. I mean, go back to World War I. You remember the Christmas truce where everybody just stopped shooting? They went out and played soccer. That's a ceasefire. What happens in a ceasefire? The enemy that you've just spent all spring and summer and early fall beating the snot out of to get them to collapse, and they're on the verge of collapse. If you have a ceasefire, they get to rest, re-equip, retrain, regroup. Then you got to do it all over again. Russia's not going to let that happen, straight up. So the first thing I'm going to do is say we continue the pressure nonstop. You know, during World War II, when the Russians won at the Battle of Kursk, they pushed the Germans back, but then the fall came, the rainy season came, and Stalin's like, we got to keep the pressure up on these Germans. Who has a plan? And everybody's like, well, it's the muddy season, and we can't do anything. And I forget, Rokokovsky or somebody of that nature went, I got a plan. We can attack. We're going to go right through the mud. We're going to cut down a whole bunch of trees, put them down, create these log roads, and we're going to advance through the swamps and hit them where they don't expect us and all this kind of stuff. And they did it. What I'm trying to get at is when there's a need to attack, the Russians will find a way to attack. The name of the mud phenomena is Rasputitsa. That's a Russian word. What's that tell you if it's a Russian word? They're sort of familiar with it. They've been dealing with the Rasputitsa twice a year for their entire history. It's not like the Russians wake up one morning and go, holy cow, it's muddy. What do we do? The Russians have been dealing with mud from day one. So they have a plan. The plan may not be sexy, it may not be big arrowy, but it's a plan to keep the pressure up on the Ukrainians. What the Russians cannot do is allow the Ukrainians to rest, retrain, re-equip, regroup. That can't happen. You've exhausted Ukrainian strategic reserves. The Ukrainians are now in a position where, in order to sustain some sort of effective combat presence on the line, the totality of the line of contact, they have to start moving forces around little fire brigades. You see that they're robbing Peter to bring them down here, attack, but then they have to go back up around Bakhmut because the Russians attack. Then the Russians come up there, Krasny Limon. Oh, we got to get troops up there, but that means they have no troops here. The Russians attack here. The Russians are going to continue to do this until the Ukrainian army collapses. Now, I still believe that the Ukrainian army could very well collapse before the muddy season comes in. But if they don't, there's not going to be a ceasefire rest. The Russians are going to continue to push while they promote a political collapse. The war doesn't end until the Zelensky government is out. And so I think you're going to see Russia doing everything possible on the diplomatic front to continue to put the pressure. And this is done directly and indirectly. Remember, NATO's worst enemy is NATO because everything bad that's happened to NATO is because of NATO. And so, there's that old adage, and I think it dates back to Sun Tzu, when the enemy's doing what you want them to do, let them do it. And so Russia's just sitting there going, this is really the easiest victory we're ever going to have, a strategic victory, because NATO is doing everything wrong, and we're just going to let them do everything wrong. Zelensky is falling apart. We're just going to let him fall apart. And where we can help, we will. Like, oh gosh, we're just going to stop selling diesel fuel at a time when the entire world needs diesel fuel. You say, well, Scott, does that really impact Europe? Yeah. You see, Europe, they're liars when they say, we don't ever want to use Russian energy. Because they're all using Russian energy. They go to India and they say, hey, India, all that Russian energy that you bought, can you sort of manipulate it a little bit? I mean, let's start running through a refinery, get a certain percentage out there so that legally now we can say that it's been touched by an Indian refinery, therefore it's become Indian, and we want to buy it from you. And the Indians are like, well, is that really good business? I mean, because if you bought it direct from the Russians, it would cost you X, but you're buying it from us, it's going to be X times 3. Yeah, obviously we can't buy it from the Russians because we're trying to hurt the Russians economically. But we just bought it from the Russians at prices higher than the oil cap that you set by. The Russians are making a lot of money anyways. It makes no sense. Europe is literally just killing Europe economically, politically, militarily. They've got nothing. The United States is in a position where now trying to restart all these production lines that we shut down during the global war on terror because we didn't need Stinger missiles anymore. We didn't need Javelin missiles anymore. We didn't need ATACMS missiles anymore. We didn't need artillery shells anymore. All we needed was counter IED vehicles, MRAPs and things like that. Build all that stuff, forget about this stuff. Now we're going, oh, Christ, we got to fight the Russians. We need all this stuff back up. And we're sitting there trying to get this stuff up. They're saying by 2025, 2026, 2028, we'll have these production lines. Meanwhile, the Russians went short on ammo, triple shifts, open up another thing, bam, they're no longer short on ammo. Cruise missiles, triple shifts, open up another production line. Boom, boom, boom. They got everything they need. New weapons, new weapons. The Russian defense industry is cranking along. So if I'm a Russian leader, I'm basically going to say, don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything precipitous. Everything is going the way we want it to go. Let's just let it keep going that way. We will continue pressure up and down the line of contact throughout the military operation. We will never let them up. Look, the Russians have been inventing weapons. I mean, you saw they talk about the Fab 500. The Fab 500 is a 1,000-pound bomb. It's a dumb bomb. Basically, it drops and free falls and it hits where it hits, unless the Russians put this. It's the equivalent of our JDAM. We take a 2,000-pound dumb bomb and then we put a GPS guidance system on it, and we put some little wing bomblets on it. And we drop it, and it sort of guides itself down to the exact coordinate on the ground that we want. The problem with that one is that the Russians jam the GPS, the satellites, and the bomb just goes dumb again. It's not hitting what it wants. We've given JDAMs to the Ukrainians. They can't use them anymore because they get jammed as soon as they hit. They're totally ineffective. The Russians going, well, rather than repeat the American mistake of the JDAM and do a Russian JDAM that can be jammed, they've built a different bomb with a different guidance system. These wings that so you drop it, boom, and it becomes a cruise missile pretty much, because you get the plane flying at a certain speed, drop it, out come the wings, and it's going to glide in, go up 30, 40 kilometers depending on the altitude you drop it at. Pinpoint precision. And these 500-kilogram bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, are just destroying the Ukrainians left and right. They can't gather their forces in preparation of attack without a Fab 500 hitting them. Then the Russians went, why don't we make a Fab 1,000? Now, that's a 2,000-pound bomb. That's a big bomb. And they're dropping those, boom, boom. Then the Russians went, why don't we make a Fab 1,500? And so they got a 3,000-pound bomb that now is satellite guide, and they just dropped it on a warehouse the other day. Goodbye, warehouse. My point is, as this winter campaign comes, these guided bombs are going to be arriving in large quantities. So the Russians don't have to, rally the troops over the trenches. Let's go and die. They just have to go blow them up, and we walk in with plastic bag, and we scoop the body parts in, and we pack it up and send it over to the Ukrainians and say, there, bury that. Light some sunflower with that. This is the reality of the Russians can reach out and touch the Ukrainians anytime, any place. The Ukrainians have shown a proclivity. They can fire these drones that hit the Black Sea fleet. They can blow up an oil tanker now and then. They can get this. They can do that. And everybody, as soon as that happens, I mean, I don't know what service you use. I'm on AOL because I'm a dinosaur. Every morning when I log in, I have to wade through, Russia has lost the war. Putin's dead of cancer. The Russian army in full retreat. Ukrainians have made a massive breakthrough. And then you click the story and you realize, nah, none of that's true. The truth is that the Ukrainians will have some propaganda victories, but the Russians are getting real victories. When the Russians drop these 1,500-kilogram bombs, they're killing 200, 300, 400 Ukrainians once. There's not too many Ukrainians left. And over the course of the coming muddy season, you're going to see a lot more Ukrainians dying. And as they die, the Russians don't need to rush forward with their tanks. They just need to plod through the mud. If they need to cut down the trees and make those corduroy roads so the tanks can get over the muddy spot, they're going to do that. Time is on their side. They are never going to let up on the pressure. They're going to keep slaughtering the Ukrainians until there's total collapse of the Ukrainian army.
Scott Ritter, thanks a lot. Everyone, don't forget, go to ScottRitterExtra.com for all of Scott's good works. And when you go there, make sure you take the opportunity to contribute to the cause. There's a various manners on there that you can help Scott out. So everything is available for free, but you can contribute, and that's needed. Scott does a lot of good work, and of course, like everyone else, he's got a family, he's got to pay bills. So help him out. Also, if you want to donate to this channel, a couple of things: go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. You can join there for free, no charge if you choose. Rockfin does allow people to become subscribers. That's like $14.99 a month if you join for a whole year. It doesn't, they knock off a couple of months, but you don't have to pay. You can just be a member without being a subscriber. Catch all my stuff. If they throw me off of YouTube, boom, you can go to Rockfin and find it. Various ways to contribute here. I got my Cash App info, buy me a coffee, Patreon, PayPal, etc. That's all available and scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And thanks a lot, everybody. Most importantly, you're looking at a couple people that are regularly tossed off Twitter more often than so. If you would be so kind as to share this video on all of your social media platforms so that everybody gets a chance to see it. Thanks a lot, Scott, and I are out.